We're looking at the Avodas HaMelech, and I think you got a copy of it. Yes? Everybody has a copy? So you'll see the Rambam in the box in the middle and the Avodas HaMelech surrounding the text of the Rambam. One of the discussions here in the Avodas HaMelech revolves around the question of paying tuition for a Melamed to teach his son Torah. And it's a very complicated issue because we derive from a Yalfusa, from a pasuk, that Ma ani bechem afatem bechinam, you're not allowed to take money for teaching of the Torah. But the Gemara does allow the Malamed to teach Torah and take money, but not for Torah per se, but rather for Shmira, for watching the child, or for Pisuk Tamim. And therefore, the father now becomes obligated to pay for Talmud Torah, and that's part of his obligation, his mitzvah. But the Malamed has to be very careful when he receives the money. It's complicated. He has to receive the money not for the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, because that he's not allowed to take money for, but for side reasons.
Isn't this just a loophole?
Where I didn't hear.
No, I said anything.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Isn't this just a big loophole?
Right. In the case of teaching Torah for a child and getting paid for it, we have to find a loophole. The Gemara is like bending over backwards to try to figure out how we can, on the one hand, facilitate the chiyuv of the father to teach his son b'schar and pay tuition. Not every father can take it upon himself to teach his son, and at the same time to orchestrate it in such a way that the Rebbe, the Melamed, could take money for it. So it's a complicated business.
Why can't it just be that the Melamed has to work for voluntarily on the side?
I don't know if you could find too many Melamdim that would be willing to do that, because to take on that job, it's almost a full-time position. It's like at least 9 to 5.
Would it even make a difference if the Melamed would work voluntarily because the obligation is to pay for Talmud Torah?
Well, no,
or not, you just define.
Yeah, no. If you can find a way of saving yourself a dime, and not having to pay, that's fine. It's the goal that we want to achieve, that the son learn Torah. Oh.
What's the deal with this halacha at all then?
So the halacha tells you that the father has to fulfill his obligation, right, but at the same time, the Melamed has to. So between the two of them, they have to sort of.
Is that Doraisa?
It's all Doraisa. Now the Avodas HaMelech wants to know, how does the Rambam, the Avodas HaMelech, I should mention this, his goal is twofold. Number one, to find sources for the Rambam, and number two, to explain the Rambam. But primarily, first and foremost, he has to find sources for the Rambam. And he does an amazing job. He comes up with sources that you and I never would have dreamt of. But in any event, in the case of the father's obligation to pay tuition for his son, for the sake of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, the Avodas HaMelech works overtime to try to figure out, where did the Rambam know that from? Because maybe the Torah says, teach your son what we call bechinam, meaning face-to-face learning. And in an event that you can't do that, so like any other mitzvah, you're anus rachmana patri. The Torah says that there are circumstances beyond your control, and that's it. There are very few mitzvahs that obligate a person financially. For example, it could be that the mitzvah of tzedakah is a financial obligation. Do you follow what I mean? To pay money to an ani and give him support, financial support. But that by definition is a monetary chiyuv. You follow? That's the essence of the mitzvah. It's a chiyuv mama. But in the case of other mitzvahs, how do you know there's a chiyuv mama? For example, my father tells me, Azaria, you're in Eretz Yisrael, I'm in New York, I want you to take a plane and service me, give me a cup of tea. So who's going to pay the bill for that? Do I have a chiyuv mamon to spend thousands of dollars so that I can, take a flight and service my father on the other side of the world? What would you say?
Yeah.
So the Gemara actually vacillates back and forth on this question.
If it's something major, I would say. What defines major, I don't know.
Right. But I'm just saying the bottom line in halacha, again, we're not learning the laws of keep it av now, is that the father will have to pick up the tab. Yeah, he could ask me to get on a plane, but he's got to pay for the plane ticket. Why? Because keep it av does not impose a chiyuv mama.
But isn't the chiyuv upon the ben?
The chiyuv on the ben is to bring his father a cup of tea, or if his father's cold at night, to cover his father. If his father needs support getting from place to place, because he's an older man, so he leans on his son. But it doesn't mean that the son has to go into his bank account and write a check in order to fulfill the mitzvah of kibbutz. Again, this is the final conclusion. I'm not saying that the Gemara finds that simple, but in any event, the burden of proof is on you to prove that any given mitzvah requires a chiyuv mama. Okay, so the Avodas HaMelech claims that the Rambam found a source in the Gemara in Kiddushin on Daf Chavtes. Let's see if I could find it in the text that I gave you. It's on the second side of the page.
Quote the Gemara Kedushin in the first paragraph on the right.
Right, but we could go through the whole thing. I just wanted to find a shortcut here. If we can, just give me a minute. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That's why I think it's on the second side. Just 1 second. Yeah. You'll see on the bottom right, on the second side of your page, Halacha Gimel, Hey Gimel. You see that? And he first quotes the Lechem Mishnah, who says on the third line, Dimisvara Yada Leila Rabbeinu. You want to underline those words? Dimisvara Yada Le Rabbeinu. And that means that the Rambam, who's called Rabbeinu, had no source for this. Misvara, what does Misvara mean? He came up with his own svara, his own thinking. However, in line 4, you'll see where he says Moran Hagrozal. Correct? You say everybody have that? Again, I'm asking you to underline this because
I don't know where you are.
Somebody help out because I can't go over it every 5 minutes. Okay?
Yeah.
So who's the Gra? The Gra is the Vilna Gaon, right? And the Avodas HaMelech was a Dayan in Vilna, so he continues the legacy of the Gaon. And basically, what he says in the Gaon, if you take a look, again, we're counting from Halacha Gimel down 1, 2, 3, 4. At the end of line 4, you didn't get it? Yeah. Okay. Do you see where it says Sham Chavtes Amid Aleph at the end of line 4? That's Kiddushin Chavtes Amid Aleph. And it says over there the following. It says B'Mila, right? Who's obligated in the midst of Mila? I mean, the child is 8 days old. Who's obligated? The father. And what happens if the father reneges on his obligation for whatever reason? I mean, it could be he's on the other side of the world. It could be that the father, died. I mean, anything could be a possibility. So the child needs Mila. And the Gemara says there that, where is it? That Mechayve, I'll read the whole line to you. Vehechi, 4 lines from the Vehechi, in a situation delo male avua, that the father did not circumcise his son. Mechayve bezdin lamulo. So who is the fallback chiyuv in the event that the father doesn't implement his chiyuv? Beitin. And lo omru kain eitza lo lamdo. On the same page in the Gemara formulates 2 obligations on the father, but there's a fundamental distinction between the 2. The first is to circumcise his son. The second is to teach his son Torah. In the case of circumcision, of Mila, the Gemara says over there that in an event that the father does not implement Mila, then it falls on Bezdin. But in the case of teaching Torah, the Gemara doesn't mention anything about Bezdin. Why isn't there a parallel here? So the Gaon of Vilna said that the reason why the Gemara omits Bezdin in the case of teaching Torah is because everyone is obligated to teach the son Torah. It's not specifically Bezdin that's responsible. You may see on the next line there, Hakol Mitzuvim. If you want to underline those words. What does Hakol Mitzuvim mean? Everyone's obligated. Rabbosai, what question should we now raise? If the obligation to teach this child Torah falls, it's incumbent upon everyone, then what question now arises?
Why does it say son?
Why does it say that the father's obligated? There's no chiv on the father, it's a chiv on everyone.
Well, isn't the initial chiv on the father? But if there is no father, then it's the chiv's on everybody.
The Gaon thinks that if everyone's obligated, then everyone's obligated. Meaning the child has to study Torah. Everyone's obligated to see to it that the child studies Torah.
But it's not obligated by Mila until the father's not around to do it.
Correct, but in the case of Mila, no one's obligated to Mila except for the father. Then Bezdin takes over after the father, so to speak, is Masalik, he pulls out. But in the case of Torah, the Gaon understood V'shinantam levanecha, and banecha means talmidecha, means anyone. So everyone's obligated equally to teach his son Torah. Meaning, you have to teach my son Torah, I have to teach your son Torah. Hakol mitzuvim. That's why Bezdin doesn't play a role over here. Bezdin plays a role when the chiyuv falls between the cracks and there's no one to pick up the chiyuv. That's true in the case of Mila, but the Gaon says, why did the Gemara omit mention of Bezdin in the case of Talmud Torah? It's because it's not pshat that the father reneged on his chiyuv and therefore it falls on Bezdin. No. Everybody is equally obligated. V'shinantam levanecha. Banecha doesn't mean my biological son. Banecha means everyone. Kol hatalmidim. Comes along the Gaon and he says this is the source for the Rambam that the father has to pay tuition for his son's Torah. He's got to hire a malamed and pay a salary. What led the Rambam to that conclusion? From the fact that the Gemara assumes that everyone, hakol mitzuvim, they're all, and then the question is, so what's special about the father? And the answer of the Rambam was there's nothing other than the fact that the father has a chiyuv mum, and he's got to pay for the tuition of his son. So far, so good? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that last part.
Right. So again, what we're trying to figure out is what's unique once we come to the conclusion that it says in the Gemara in Kiddushin, not explicitly, but by implication, that everyone has to teach the son Torah, not just the father, then we have to come up with an answer to the question, what makes the father's obligation unique? this is what if you remember when we spoke about lumdus way back when, we spoke about a din kloli and a din misuyam. Well, there's a din kloli that everyone has to teach Torah to everyone's son. So what's the din misuyam? What's the bezundra? In Yiddish we call it a bezundra halacha, a bezundra chiyuv, a special chiyuv on the father. And the only answer that the Rambam could come up with, and for that matter the Gaon, in explaining the Rambam, was that the father has to pay tuition.
That was the Vilna Gaon?
Vilna Gaon. So the Avodas HaMelech is hereby presenting the approach of the Vilna Gaon, that basically there are two obligations to teach the son Torah. One falls on the father and it includes monetary obligation, and another falls on everybody, Hakol Mitzuvim. But there's no monetary element. So if I can teach your son Torah, fine, give me a bracha for that. But if I can't teach your son Torah and I can only hire a malamed because I got bucks in my bank account, I don't have to dig into my bank account for your son. And that makes the father's chiyuv radically different, shall we say fundamentally different from that of Hakol Mitzuvim.
So according to that, then why should the father have priority for his son over any other person's son?
Oh, excellent. So that's what I want to get from the next part of the Avodas HaMelech. But keep your question on the back burners, because there's another major piece here in the Avodas HaMelech that I want to study with.
What was it?
The question I is asking is, how do we know that if all things are equal, the father's the one who has to teach the son Torah? I mean, if everyone's obligated, maybe it's a free-for-all. So, oh man, I don't know what to do now, because I can spend an hour answering your question, but I'm just going to say this super fast, and I don't think you'll cop it, but maybe you will. I don't know. There's a whole issue about kvura, about the obligation to bury the dead. Because it seems that the primary obligation is on the husband to bury his wife if she dies first. But yet, the whole family is obligated in kfur. There are 7 close relatives. So it could be that the halacha works in this way, that X, Mr. X, we'll call it the husband, he's got the first primary obligation. Only when he pulls out, in event that he doesn't fulfill his obligation, then everyone else becomes obligated. But they're not obligated as long as he's obligated. Once he pulls out and there's no longer possibility for him to bury his wife, for whatever reason, then the obligation is generated. Others say that no, that's not the pshat. They're all obligated at the same time. And the nafkamina is going to be what's called onein. Forget it. I'm going to drop it. This is way too advanced.
They go down a level in Avodah.
The din of onein applies when you have a chiyuv kfura. So the question is, if the husband picks up that chiyuv and none of the other relatives do, then they're not owning it. But if on the other hand we're saying they're all obligated simultaneously, just like maybe the husband has to shell out the money for it, then they're all owning it, because they all, from the moment that she dies, they're all obligated. And the same question you could ask about Talmud Torah. Is it the pshat that everyone's obligated to teach your son Torah, and all the other obligations emerge simultaneously, or no? The father is obligated. As long as the father is in the ballpark, if he's in the pitcher's mound, then the other members of the community are not obligated at all. Or no, do we say they're all obligated, just that the father has a little bit more of a primary obligation? And just 1 second before I lose my trend, I just want to say that, that the nafkamina is going to be chotef. Do we know what chotef is? Somebody want to volunteer just to write the word chotef on the board?
Yeah.
Is that how you spell it? Just one second. Yeah, that sounds right. Okay, now you could write on the left side, Asara Zehuvin. Okay, 10 gold pieces. Okay, now what happens? Let's say you have a mitzvah, and I go ahead and grab that mitzvah away from you, and I fulfill the mitzvah not letting you, so you can sue me for 10 Zehuvim Kesef. Now, what happens if somebody comes along and teaches my son Torah and chaps, that's called chotef, he chaps the mitzvah away from me, I'm the father. Do I have the legal right to charge him asar zehuvim? And the Gaon says I can't charge him asar zehuvim because he, like me, is obligated to teach my son Torah. Others say no. The obligation is on the father. In event that the father drops out of the picture, then the obligation is generated. This is lumdus on the purest level, very abstract. Okay, again, Rabbi say this is an hour's discussion. I don't know if we can get into it now. I'll talk to you about it in Zoom when you're in Poland.
According to the Gra's explanation of the Rambam, the whole point was that neither one has priority, so to speak. Neither one comes first. So we still have the question of if he's explained the Rambam that that everybody has the chiyuv at the same time, then how could the Rambam say that the father has priority? We haven't answered the question according to the Gra.
You mean the son has priority, meaning
the father has the priority
right,
to the son.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So again, there's kedima, and then there's paying tuition. So that the chiyuv, according to the Gaon, is incumbent upon everyone to teach everybody's son Torah. So it's not just a chiyuv on the father. Therefore, if somebody grabs my son and teaches him, I can't sue him for chotev. But, says the Gaon, at the same time, the father has a monetary chiyuv, which you follow, they're all chayav simultaneously, but it's a different chiyuv in the case of the father. The father has to go into his, dip into his bank account.
So we're saying the fact that the father has a monetary chiyuv that gives him kedima?
Could be. I mean, that's going to be Burzon's shot in the Avodas HaMelech, but we didn't get to the Avodas HaMelech. You follow what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty hot in here, no?
Yeah.
No, I don't need an air conditioner. I just have to take off this black jacket. Okay. All right.
You should just throw this to somebody during class.
He'll charge you sorry, as a hoop.
I'm saying, if I were to do it, would you see it as disrespectful?
I don't know. It might be chovel v'chavero, Yechayev Malchus for violating a law in the Torah, Baltosif, but other than that, fine. If you don't mind 39 lashes, I mean, I'll give you Edom and Asra. That's it. Okay, fine. Let me go on, because now we're getting to the.
That means don't fall asleep.
Now we're getting to the real sensitive stuff. The Gemara says in Kiddushin Adaf Chav Tes Amid Beis, Heche de lo limdo aviv. Actually, it's in Aramaic, but so it says Heche de lo ligmere aviv, ligmere nafshe. I'll translate that. If the father didn't teach his son Torah, then he, and you'll tell me who he is referring to, has to teach himself Torah. Who's he?
The Ben.
The Ben.
What if he doesn't know any Torah at all? He needs something.
So wait, let's go slowly. The Avodas HaMelech, and it starts with the words. Just see where I can find it for you. Oh, you see on the top left column on the same page, line 2, it says Lamed Ayin Nun Dal. What does that mean? Le'anius daiti, nira lahosef. I want to add something, says the Avodas HaMelech. He's adding something to the Gaon, meaning he's going to find the source for the Rambam, on the basis of which the Rambam concludes that the father has to pay tuition. So again, let's go over it. According to the Gaon, how does the Rambam know that the father has to pay tuition? Because the Gaon understood, based on a diuk in the Gemara, because the Gemara didn't mention Bezdin, that everyone is equally obligated to teach Torah to his son. And then the Gaon says, so what's unique about the father's chiyuv? The answer is that he has to pay tuition. That was the Gaon. Now, the Avodas HaMelech says, the Niral Aniyus Tait. He wants to add something. The Gemara says that if his father didn't teach him Torah, then on the fourth line there, Chayav L'lamed is Atzm. And the Gemara quotes a pasuk, Ulamadatem osam ushmartem lasosam. This is the source of the Ram. So you see the Ayin Chaf. Do you see what is Ayin Chaf, everyone? Imkain is with an aleph, not with an ayin. Ayin Chaf means al karchach. Whenever you have a proof, you start with a premise, you ask a question on the premise, and you answer and derive a conclusion from that question called Ayin Chaf, al karchach. We have no choice. Al karchach bischar ayri. When the Gemara says that in event that the father didn't teach the son Torah, the son has to teach himself Torah, it must be referring to schar. Meaning that the son has to pay a malamed, again, I don't know where he's going to get the bucks for that, to teach him Torah. How did the Avodas HaMelech know that? De'i bechinam, it can't be. By the way, I'm just reminding myself, today is what? Wednesday?
Yeah.
I think on Monday I left you with a quiz question. Did anybody answer that quiz question? With the Rabbi Cheskel Sarna? No? Okay.
What's the question? Did we answer it? No, I at least
Okay. So there's a gap here between Monday and today. I want to fill in that gap. Not today, but some other time. Maybe when you're in Poland. I don't know. If the Poles will allow it. You know, they're not very pro-Jewish over there, but I wish you luck. When I was in Poland, we went to visit a certain town because one of the survivors who came with us on the trip came from that town. He himself came from that town. He described fascinating things about the town. But anyway, the mayor of that town, a guy, a Pole, there are no Jews there, he came out to greet us. We were 400 yeshiva guys. And he spoke about the Holocaust, the war. How many times did he mention the Jews? 0, not once. Whereas all the Jews in that town, except for 1 or 2 survivors, were murdered by the Nazis. And the Poles helped them out. But again, the Poles deny that, but we know that's not true. Anyway.
Did the guy say, I lived here, to the mayor?
What did he say?
The old man say
No,
that he lived there?
No, he was too busy translating the Polish into English for us. Yeah, anyway. But after we finished, because again, you don't want to insult the mayor, you know what I mean? But no mention of the Jews, you know, as if you know nothing happened to the Jews. There you go. Anyway,
the same thing.
So I wish you luck in Poland. Anyway, let's get back to this. So he says the following: Al karchach b'schar ayri. How does he know this? De'i bechinam. If we're talking about the son learning Torah on his own, you know, give him a sefer, give him a library, and he'll research the Torah on his own without paying a malamed. Harei gam be'im limdo aviv mechuyev lilmod. Even if his father taught him Torah, let's say his father taught him Torah Shebechsav, you know, the written Torah, he still has to go on and learn a lot more Torah. So what are you telling me that in the event that your father didn't teach you Torah, you have to learn Torah? Even if your father taught you Torah, you'd still have to learn Torah. Why does the Rambam add this condition that the son has a chiyuv of Talmud Torah if his father didn't teach him? And what? And if his father did teach him, he doesn't have a chiyuv? The Rambam makes it contingent. The answer is what the Rambam's goal is to be machadish to you that the son has to pay tuition. And why does the son have to pay tuition? That was your phone, right?
Yeah.
Rav Yama changed his mind. Okay. Why does the son have to pay tuition? Who can answer that question?
His father can't teach him his Chaim Yatzman, so.
Can you add a few words?
I mean, is he
Because he's
13?
bad by us,
What?
like,
Is he 13 yet?
Oh, okay, that's coming down the line too. You got to be patient. You guys are asking all the good hot questions, but I meant to say something else. The Avodas HaMelech is saying that if it was chinam, meaning if we're not talking about schar, so why is the Gemara saying and the Rambam following suit that since his father didn't teach him, he has to teach himself, as if to say that his father teach him, he doesn't have to teach himself. That's ridiculous. If you have a chiv of Talmud Torah, that's a lifelong, it's a life,
You can infer that since that's a redundant statement, that it's talking about schar.
Oh, now there's a chiddush. The chiddush is that if his father didn't teach him Torah, then he, the son, picks up the. Can I use this phrase? The son steps into his father's shoes. And to the same extent that the father had a certain chiyuv, which we try to define, now the son steps up to the plate and steps into his father's shoes, and now the son picks up that chiyuv. And now we're saying, boy, he's really trying to get you. He doesn't want to give up. We have this private joke going on here. Anyway, so the father didn't live up to his chiyuv. What happens to that chiyuv? The Gemara and the Rambam are saying it doesn't just fly into the air, but rather it's transferred, if you will, inherited by the son. So the son is now inheriting his father's chiyuv. Why? Because his father didn't fulfill his chiyuv. He didn't teach him Torah. And what's the chiddush now? The chiddush now is that the son embraces the father's chiyuv. So what is it? Schar. But that means that the father was obligated to schar. The father was obligated to schar. It didn't live up to his chiyuv. Now that chiyuv transfers, is inherited by the son. I like that word, inherited. And therefore the son steps into the shoes of his father, and he's going to have to pay schar. But now the Avodas HaMelech continues and adds something. I rack my brains on this. See, al korcha b'schar ayri de ibachino harei gambi im limdo ovim mechuyev lilmod v'chein b'nedorim v'chein b'choros. So he quotes different sugyas in Shas. De mechuyev lilamed atzmo b'schar. Okay, so far we got what we got, but take a look at the next line. And he writes, Varehu yeshlo rak din kedima libno. Now, again, what that line means, I don't know right now. We'll bracket it and we'll come back to it in Mitzvah Hashem. But look at the next line. He says, in Kain Nimtza, what we gather from this is Kevan de Mechuyev Lolamed Atzma B'schar, Mechuyev Gam Lolamed Es B'no B'schar. So he's creating a kind of an equation, like a mirror image, between his chiyuv vis-a-vis himself, towards himself to learn Torah, and the chiyuv of the father to teach him Torah. Is kevan de mechuyev l'lamed atzmo b'schar, mechuyev gam l'lamed es b'no b'schar. Now, I don't know what the word kevan means here, but maybe it means a proof. Maybe he's just proving from the fact that he has to teach himself Torah and pay for it, having inherited the chiyuv because his father did not live up to the chiyuv, and now we're saying that he, the son, has a chiyuv to pay a malamed, then it must be that his father had a chiyuv to pay the malamed. Do you follow? There's like, in Hilchos Shabbos terms, we have an Av and a Tolda, right? So the Av here is the father's obligation. The Tolda is the son picking up the chiyuv for the father. So if the Tolda, meaning the son, is chayiv to pay schar, then it must be that the father, which is the main chiyuv, also has to pay schar. But what is this line in the middle over here when he says, "V'arehu yeshlo rak kedima libno, u'b'hoy b'no zoriz gam b'no kodma." Yeshlo rak din kedima libno. Now he seems to be comparing a chiyuv of a person to teach himself Torah to the chiyuv of teaching his son Torah. What time is it? This is very complicated. Okay, let me give it one shot. I need another few hours on this, but I think the Avodas HaMelech is trying to prove and establish an equation, or shall we say an equilibrium, between a person's obligation to study Torah himself and a person as a father's obligation to teach his son Torah. How do you see that? And then we'll derive a conclusion from that. But how do you prove that? From the fact that there's halach of kedima. Now, where does the halach of kedima appear? Not in halacha beis, that's not the kedima we're talking about, but rather in halacha dalet. Do you have halacha dalet? It should be on the, I think I gave you 2 pages, right? 1 page. No, yesterday I gave out 2 pages. Okay.
Yeah.
Whoops. So in halacha dalet, the Rambam writes, "Hayehu lilmod Torah v'yeshlo ben lilmod Torah." So he has an obligation to study Torah, he the father, and he has an obligation to teach his son Torah. Is hu kodem libno? When you're dealing with kedima, says the Avodas HaMelech, then you're talking about 2 equal chiyuvim. If you say A comes before B, it's only because A and B are fundamentally equal. And the only difference between them is kedima. You can't compare, apples and oranges, 2 things and talk about kedima. Kedima only applies when you have 2 equal chiyuvim. And the Avodas HaMelech says, I'll prove to you that they're 2 equal chiyuvim, because it's not always going to be so that you take precedence over your son of certain conditions, right? If we change some of the variables, the son comes first. Because the Rambam says in the next few words, Hoya beno zaris navonu maskil yoser bimenu, but more than the father, beno koda. So again, when you're dealing with kedima, you have to figure out the various factors and variables and who comes first and so forth and so on. But fundamentally, you talk about 2 equal chiyuvim. Now, what's the impact of that? What's the poel yotze? How do you say the derivation? what do we want to derive from that? We want to derive from that if the chiyuv to himself and the chiyuv to teach his son are equal, and the only difference between them is kedima, then it must be that if you have to hire malamed to teach yourself, then you have to hire malamed to teach your son, because they're both fundamentally the same chiyuv. I would add, they're all part of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. This is like an umbrella mitzvah of Talmud Torah that includes learning Torah for yourself and teaching Torah to your son. And insofar as they're part of one umbrella organization, which is called Talmud Torah, they're equal. If they're equal, what do I do in a case where I have to choose one over the other? So then there are laws of Kedima. There are rules that will govern the game. But fundamentally, they're equal. And in fact, there is no hardcore absolute rule that the father teaches himself Torah and postpones the teaching of his son. No, there are situations in which it goes the other way around. His son is more capable than the father, then the son gets kedima. But fundamentally, in the context of kedima, you're talking about two equal chiyuvim. And therefore, says the Avodas HaMelech, Nimtza kevan de mechuyev lil lamed atzmo b'schar, mechuyev gam lil lamed is beno b'schar. Why? Because they're two sides of the same coin. They're two equal chiyuvim. So if I can establish that you have to pay a malamed to teach yourself Torah, right, in the event that there's no other option, then you have to hire a malamed to teach your son Torah, because they're both equal chiyuv. So then the Avodas HaMelech has now established a new source for the Rambam. From whence did the Rambam derive the conclusion that a father has to pay tuition for his son? The answer is because the Gemara says that if his father didn't teach him Torah, he has to teach himself Torah. And why does the Gemara say because his father didn't teach him Torah? The answer is in order to mechadish that the son has to teach himself Torah b'schar. If the son has to teach himself Torah b'schar, Kevin de mechuyev l'lamed atzmo b'schar, if you want to underline those words, mechuyev gam l'lamed es beno, he has to teach his son b'schar. Okay, now Rabbi say this is where we'll stop for today, and hopefully we'll be able to conclude tomorrow.